the daily campus, listening to speakers like Michael, and saying to myself lately, damn, I wish I'd said that. And it's been over and over. So impressive what our students have done. Earlier I was talking about an editorial I read this morning in the Daily Campus talking about this election and saying, you know, how divisive it's been. It's probably the most divisive time in American history other than the Civil War, and how much we all need closure that the election will bring, and how we may not get it immediately, and that we don't know what's going to happen tonight. We may get closure tonight, we may get an answer, or it may take several days. And so to be prepared for both. But no matter what happens, whether there's an outcome or whether we're on hold, the important thing is to support each other as a community. And these are actually words that I'm stealing unashamedly from Daily Campus editorial, because our students are providing the leadership, and hopefully the 18 to 24-year-olds will provide the leadership for the rest of the country now and into the future. So I am not a political scientist. I am an engineer, so I'm not going to wax on about the election other than to say I commend you on, are there other engineers out there? Hooray! All right, excellent. So other than to say I commend you on participating in this important event in our democracy and for being here to socialize safely and to support each other no matter the outcome. So remember, whether Republican or Democrat or independent, we're all Huskies. So go Huskies, have a good evening. All right, thank you. Now I think I'm going to turn it over directly to our stellar provost, Carl Lejwe.
So it's really great that this event's happening, and it's really great that as a community we're trying to lean into a time when many of us feel really stressed and really unsure and really anxious. And when student affairs and the dean of students, I see Ellie back there, when she started working with USG and PERG to say, hey, we can have an event to try to bring some thoughtfulness to what we're feeling, to what's happening. That seemed terrifying, but it also seemed really important. And so that's where a lot of the genesis for tonight came from. And so I'm new here. I came right in the middle of a pandemic. I have excellent timing. And it's been great. It's been great to get to know this community, to have a team of leaders who care deeply about students, and students who really care about this university and are willing to speak their mind. I see Damani back there, and I just assumed he was 7 feet tall in reality because he is such a big presence when he's talking to other faculty in Senate meetings. You know, the way Michael talks about where we can go as a university. I haven't met Colleen before, but what PERG does as part of this being a place where students can express their views and we can have good conversations. So I'll tell you a quick story. When I first got to Kansas, where I was before here, I was spending time with the president of the university, and I was there with my wife, Sarah, and we were talking for a little while, and Sarah was talking about her background and her experience, and the president kind of looked at both of us and looked at her and said, what happened? And, you know, I didn't think that was that funny, but that's what I feel most of the time, because, what, Ellie, you asked that too? So what I'm really excited about tonight is my wife has a truly unique American story. And I think it's really important for her to have an opportunity to become part of this community and for you to have an opportunity to hear from her. So when she's done, I'm going to come back up and talk a little bit about mental health. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'd like to really talk about what my other part of my life as a researcher and as an academic can bring to tonight. But before we do that, I really would love for you to have a chance to hear from Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Lejway. It's an honor to be here with you guys tonight. It's interesting that most of the time I was on the other side, like when you watch the results, you're on your phone or you were going to have the TV on, but I was a TV producer, executive producer, so I was giving the information to the audience. So it's a great experience to be on this side, not in the control room. But that was a fun experience, by the way. I grew up in Iran. I'm Iranian American. I emigrated to the United States back in 1995. I grew up in Iran during Iran-Iraq War. The first time I actually learned about or followed U.S. election was when I was 5 years old. 5-year-old kid in Iran, in a small city in northern part of Iran, thousands and thousands of miles away from the United States, because U.S. election had a direct impact on Iranian regime and the way things are going, one way or another, which candidates has, everyone has a different, foreign policy. So I was always, as a 5-year-old, because my father used to tune in to Voice of America, which was a radio station back then, and then so I learned about, presidential elections and, the election of the United States and how important it is for Iranians in Iran. I moved to the United States back in 1995 because, as an Iranian woman, you're a second-class citizen. So as I was growing up, I always had a problem with the system and everything, and I wanted to have a experience of freedom of speech, freedom of everything, and freedom in general, actually. And there are so many aspects to freedom and democracy. So I moved here. It was a tough decision. There's always a price you have to pay, and I did pay for it. And it was the most interesting experience I had was when I started working at Voice of America. As a 5-year-old, my father used to listen to when I was 5 years old, a girl in Iran, I used to listen to Voice of America, which was a radio station. When I started working at Voice of America, which started around 2002, and my career ended in 2017 at Voice of America. The most important experience I had was the same voice that my father listened to. I was the guy's executive producer. He was my anchor. So the first time I met him, I hugged him and I said, I know you. He's like, I've never met you. I'm like, I know you as a 5-year, since I was 5 years old, because I remember your voice. So it was quite an experience. And working for U.S. government as a federal employee, I had to pay a big price for that. And the price was like, I can never go back to Iran. Yes, I'm an Iranian American. I'm mostly American. I care about this country. This is my country. But my whole family lived there. So I can never say I'm detached from Iran. That's where I was born, and that's where my family live. And all the elections, as I mentioned, U.S. elections, specifically this one, has a direct and very important impact on Iranian life. Not only I don't care about any government, but as an individual, my family, everyone, they're going to be impacted, and one way or another. I mean, nothing good or bad. I mean, it can go either way. But this is an important one, and this is a great country. I never feel like a second-class citizen, which as a woman, I did feel like that when I was in Iran. I think we take it sometimes we take it for granted, and then I think back and I'm like, sometimes I'm frustrated. Oh, I haven't seen my mother for 5 years or my father, and then I remember about the great things about this country and the fact that as an Iranian American, I can vote and I have a voice. I can talk about things. I can have the freedom of speech. That, we can exchange ideas and discuss about things. And these are the things that we take. I think sometimes we take it lightly, but they're very important, and it's been a very important part of my life. And I'm proud that I had the opportunity to work for Voice of America and Radio Free Europe as an executive producer for news, because for me to promote American democracy to the countries that they're heavily, like media is heavily jammed or censored, and there is no real, like you can't get any information from anywhere. It's an important job, but there's a big price for that, and that is I can never ever go back to Iran, even if my family need my help, unless there's a regime change. Because as far as the regime in Iran, I'm the enemy of Iran. But anyways, that's a big price. I had to think about it, but I'm proud. I would do that again if I have to go back and make that decision. I would still do it. I'm passionate about it, and hopefully in the future I would still do the same thing. Thank you, and Carl, my husband. This was my first time. Sorry if I was a little bit whatever.
No. Sarah has a real opinion about what she wants to have happen, but I just begged her not to share it, so she she was really good about that. Yeah. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and two of the things that I had studied at some point in my life were predictability and controllability. And these are really important concepts in psychology. And when you do studies to try to understand how these factors impact things, what we find is that when you don't have control over a situation, it can be incredibly hard on your physical health, your mental health. But oddly, it's not just control, it's actually a sense of predictability that has the biggest impact on your physical long-term health, ulcers, your ability to function. And right now, I think a lot of folks really feel like things are unpredictable. And that has a huge impact. So, I come from a family where there's a lot of mental health issues. I have had my own mental health issues. Sarah has had her own mental health issues. She was going to talk about that, but, I told her that I would share both of ours. This has always been something we struggle with, and times like this make that even harder. And we all feel isolated right now, and, I understand the importance of freedom of speech, but I also struggle with it. I struggle with what it means and the hurt and the hatred and the pain that goes along with that and the lack of inclusivity. And I don't always know that I come down on the right side of that, because I really struggle with the impact of words and how it makes communities feel and how it makes us struggle. And that's why we have a university, because we push through those things and we think about the right ways to do it, but we also learn that times change. And we also learn that the way we approach things change. And what I appreciate at this moment in this university is we can have those conversations. And maybe there's a way in which we can struggle with the beauty and the importance of freedom of speech, but also struggle with our responsibility when it comes to inclusivity. Struggle with our responsibility when it comes to respect for people's dignity and all the other things that go along with it. I don't know the answers. And most of the time, as a researcher, I didn't know the answers either, and that didn't bother me. That seemed exciting. I used this word before. This feels terrifying. But when you feel terrified, you lean into it. And so as a community, being here together, being able to talk about these things, we figure out what our answers are to that. And I think the most important thing about tonight is to remember it may feel like this is the craziest time ever, but I actually did a little bit of research. I'm not a political scientist, but in 1800, there was an election with Jefferson and Adams. They were president and vice president previously. They ended up running against each other. John Adams was labeled as a fool, a hypocrite, a criminal, and a tyrant. Jefferson was branded as a weakling, an atheist, a libertine, and a coward. In 1824, Andrew Jackson won the popular vote and the Electoral College and still lost. And that was because of what was called a corrupt bargain between Adams and Henry Clay, where Henry Clay ended up getting a cushy position by somehow managing to ensure that Jefferson, even though he had won all the, Jackson, even though he had won all these, both parts of the vote, still didn't win. And we've gotten past all that. And actually what was interesting when I read about that today, there was a picture and I was like, oh, that person looks really familiar, and was one of our faculty who actually had written about this and was the expert on this area. So it feels like for many of us that this is a time where we just feel hopeless and don't know where to go. But when I think about my wife's experience and what it means to be able to think about what still is great about this country, what is our opportunity and our blessing, and the way in which that we lean into it and engage to it, that's what makes me feel optimistic. So I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. I'm happy that this is my community now, and I really appreciate all of you being willing to lean into. I forgot to plant some softball questions in the audience. We should ask it. We'll start asking you questions if you're not careful. So, well, listen, thanks. And if you decide you have other questions, we'll be here.
Yeah, I have a question. So you spoke about how you worked at Kentucky before here. Can you talk a little bit about what you think the selection will mean specifically here at UConn and how that might be different, and then what you are bringing from your previous experience as a member of faculty at another university to the position you're currently in at this university?
Yeah, so, Kansas is an interesting state because it is a very conservative state, but where the university is an extremely liberal part of the state, and it is really viewed in a very adversarial way. And one of the things I really like about being at UConn is the university for this state. When you're in Kansas, depending on where you are, the university of the state is KU, Wichita State, Kansas State, Fort Hays State, Emporia State, or Pittsburgh State. And KU is just another school. And not having that identity of a major state university is really hard for a state. And so I think what we have an opportunity to be here as an engine, and this is one of the president's priorities for the university, as an engine for the whole state. I think there being able to have a clear sense at the university of what we are able to do to produce students who are really good thinkers, who have really good career readiness skills, who want to impact the state in a positive way. That's part of what's on the line here. It isn't just the university, it's the providence of the state and the extent to which this region continues to be a rich and thoughtful environment. At Kansas, it was harder because there wasn't a sense that we were all kind of rowing together. And even though there are divides everywhere, I do think we have an opportunity here, particularly with a night like this, and if we're able to move forward in a positive way, wherever things end up, we have that kind of single relationship with the state that I think is a real strength.
Is on? There we go. My question is for Sarah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the race. And in your experience as a journalist and as someone who knows a lot about politics and the media, what are you looking for tonight in terms of rhetoric and in terms of how, both campaigns as well as the media talks about what happens, and the very real reality that we might not know the results of this election? What are you looking for that might signal how we as a country and we as a society are going to move forward from this election, maybe not knowing the results for a week or more?
It's a very tough question, but I don't know what to say. I mean, if I get your question, there were different parts in your questions. Are you asking me what am I looking for in this election as I watch the results, or what is it exactly? So can you be more specific about your question?
Just kind of how is the way that the candidates and the media as a whole, how that they talk about the results of this election as they come in? What are you looking for in terms of that might signal how we're going to move forward from this election as a society?
Well, at Voice of America, in TV station, this is my experience. I don't know about other media. You can be your own judge by flipping through channels, and you will see what kind of, strategy or what kind of statement that they have to stick to, or what's their journalistic code. But for Voice of America was transparency, accurate news, and it's not about how we felt about one candidate or one other, or what we wanted to see, or what the government of the United States wanted to see. What we had to stick to the facts, whatever it's there, and nothing more, and being just regardless of your party or affiliation with any, which as a Democrat, or Republican or an independent, as a journalist, you have to be unbiased, and you have to make sure and double check and triple check that you are not in favor, or so you have to be neutral. So I hope I answered your question, and that was our journalistic code we had to stick to.
Part of it also is what happens in those places where there isn't that. And so how are we responding to that uncertainty? And so what are the ways in which we're modeling in the university, in our newspapers, in just the way our parties are talking about what's happening? What are we modeling? even in uncertainty, there are going to be signs of what we are capable to do once things are resolved. Because at that point, we really do have to come together in a way that we probably haven't seen really in quite some time. Because otherwise, it's going to be very challenging for whichever administration to accomplish much of anything unless we're willing to do that. So that's my hope, and that's what I would look for.
From a Yukon perspective, if we expand on that, what are both the president and the provost's opinions on kind of moving forward? If tonight we don't see a clear result, as many are expecting, and as a political science student myself, has Yukon had talks in administration of how to deal with potentially contested election for the few weeks that are going to remain, and how that may cause issues on campus or in Connecticut? Like Sean Lamont said today, he's not expecting to see anything at all, but of course the National Guard is on standby, as is in multiple states. Does Yukon have any thoughts on that as of yet, or has had any discussions with any administration?
Yeah, and that's actually where the next week is particularly important with the events that we have. I think, again, it's leaning in. I think whether things are known or not, we have a responsibility as a university to create as many opportunities to have these conversations, both about how we're feeling, but also about what's next. And so the Human Rights Institute and the Humanities Institute, a variety of other places, hopefully you all have seen this. There's a variety of presentations over the next week about what now. What does either the results or the uncertainty of the results mean for different intersectionalities? What does it mean for different groups? What does it mean for different parts of our country? And so I think, we want to always have reactive strategies in place, but what I like about what we've tried to do this year is to be more proactive. Try to have events where we can have these conversations. Try to model what it means to talk these things through as opposed to being polarized. So the hope is that by having enough opportunities to bring folks together to talk about these things, that we are going to be spending our time in discourse and not in creating division. Now, of course, you don't know what will happen with that, so we do have to be prepared if there are situations where things go differently than we'd like. But I think what is different this time in kind of where we all were in academia in 2016 is we just didn't prepare. We didn't think about how do we create the environments to have those conversations. Tom, I don't know if you want to.
No, these are really great questions. And so the first thing you asked is, have we talked about it? And yeah, kind of similar to the governor, and we recognize what happened in 2016, as Provost Lejwe said. We knew there were assaults and there were insults that took place that were unacceptable after the election. So we have stood up our emergency response team, starting with tonight, just in case. We're not expecting any of that. We don't have any signaling that we're going to get any of that, but prepared for it, just in case, to keep the community safe. That's number one. What I don't know how things are going to go. Carl and I talked about sending a message to the community tomorrow, but we've intentionally not written it because we really don't know what it is we'll be responding to. We're going to find out in the next coming hours. A lot of signaling from the question you asked about, how does the media handle it? How do the parties communicate it? And what I've was like, people like Lindsey Graham, right? Who I'm looking for that to be that would be my answer to your question. That's a key signal because we've seen that Trump has not been very committal to a peaceful transition of power should he lose. But others within the party who are very loyal to him have been more clear about that. They've said, whatever the Supreme Court does, we're going to support, period. So I think I'm looking for those signals to still be made by the parties on both sides. And I also expect, even though we have a very conservative court, I think they're all constitutional scholars who care deeply about democracy. So I feel a sense of optimism there that we will have a fair outcome. But we're basically ready to respond to anything. We're prepare, and then be flexible and pivot if the unexpected occurs. But it's a great question.
Is it really the role of the university to encourage people to vote either for or against? It seems in order to be an education of learning, an institution of learning, one needs to make a pre-commitment not to tell people how to act. So wouldn't telling people to vote or not vote or anything along those lines sort of be an abolishment of our duties?
This is a great question. I would say, for starters, one thing that's really important for us to not do is to tell anyone what to think. Right? We're here to teach students how to think, but it's up to them to decide what conclusions they draw from the knowledge they gain here. So that's very important, first of all. But one of the roles of a public university from the beginning, from the very first public universities, they were created in support of democracy. It was recognized, Jefferson was one of the first to recognize that the key to democracy was an informed citizenry, and that if we didn't have an educated citizenry, we couldn't be a successful democracy. And I believe that's part of what our mission is here, is preparing an informed citizenry to be the leaders, to be the citizens who make the decisions that guide us in the right direction. So if you don't, who would, right? If you don't vote. So I actually feel fine encouraging everyone to vote. I think obviously it's your choice. You can decide you don't want to. But I do feel it's part of our mission to give you the information to be knowledgeable citizens and to guide our society in the right direction.
And the other thing I would add to that, too, is when we think about what our role is in the university from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, every student comes to the university with a different set of experiences. And there are many students who've come to the university that are fully aware of voting and what that means and how you do it and all the pieces that go along with it. But that's not the case for everyone. And so part of what I see our role is, it is never to, as Tom said, never to say you have to do this. But I think in encouraging, in providing as many resources, in making it clear the connection between democracy and our potential role in it, it is trying to level that playing field so that everyone comes into this with a sense of what their opportunity is in terms of being a part of that process. Never to force it, but to try to create that sense where so folks who've not had that opportunity to really fully embrace what that means have that opportunity to hear that argument. So that's why I share it.
Hi, I have a question. Okay, so with the previous incidents that have happened on campus, such as what's happened in South with those racial incidents, as well as the Spirit Rock, how do you go about after the election? I feel that this will only amplify these incidents. So what is the university doing to prevent this or to make students feel safe? Because I do live in South, and there's been 3 incidents now. So what are some steps that you're taking? Or if something happens because after the election things are amplified and crazy, what's going to happen? What are you going to tell students to make them feel safe? Or what are you going to tell the UConn community to stop this if you can? I don't know if you really do have the power to do that. You can't control the student. Yeah. But are the consequences or is the investigation severe enough to prevent this from happening again?
Yeah, I mean, I share your concern completely. I don't think we can prevent these kinds of incidents from happening, but we can respond as vigorously as we possibly can, and we can do it as a community, starting with me and with Provost Lejwe, but continuing on down to every one of us, right? An insult to any one of us is an insult to all of us. And so, we created the inform.uconn.edu website. Please, if you're aware of one of these things, report it there. But also, if it's happening in real time, call the police, call 911. And if you feel unsafe, call 911. The campus police is here to keep us safe, to keep you safe. And I know that for the most part, they're very committed to this. And many of them are former UConn students themselves in our service. And they take that guardian role very seriously. So please call, and we'll do everything we can to protect you. And then we will do everything we can to pursue those who create these assaults. And we will, with every resource we have, or every recourse we have, we will hold them accountable to the extent we can.
And I really struggle with this in the way that President Katsilas did too, because I'd like our answer to be we can stop every case of that. And I think in your question there is an important point of if there's a belief that we are taking it seriously, that there would be consequences, it may be less likely to happen. And that's a responsibility that we have been in our meetings with our Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Tuitt. We have been having many meetings over the past few weeks to think about, okay, in this heightened time, how can we respond to these things? What are the ways in which we support the Dean of Students to be able to really get the right information? How do we work with public safety in a way where it feels like it is a collaboration and we were doing it in a way that feels safe and effective to students? And so this is something where we can be proactive to some extent, but we really, if things happen, we just have to be as responsive as we can. We have to do investigations. We have to do exactly what President Katsilas said, and we certainly take this seriously, and we hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, we will be very vigorous.
All righty, we're going to be doing one more question.
Hi, I had a question about ideological diversity on campus. As a recent immigrant myself, I have a lot hanging on this word, but I'm really struck by how the university hasn't really made an effort to provide a way of basically events or resources for students to help understand the other side, or get a glance at what ideological diversity on campus could be like, or what the other political side might be thinking or feeling. And I feel like in the quest of trying to keep everyone safe, we have really sacrificed a lot when it comes to education, the true aim of education, which is to expose students to multiple viewpoints and perspectives. So how do you hope to address that in the future and after this election as well?
Oh, no, go ahead first. Well, and so listen, it's always hard to know what's the best way to reach students with the different events that we have. Tonight is more about being able to be together, but in terms of the events that have led up to tonight, the What Now events that are happening over the next week, those are exactly the kind of conversations that'll be happening. So if it would be good for students to go to the Student Affairs website on voting, and it has all the different events over the next week, and those will be, again, exactly the kind of conversations that we're trying to have here. And you're right, I mean, we are trying to balance both the uncertainty, the feeling of anxiety, and creating that safety, but in the classroom space, in these other events, there are some pretty vigorous conversations happening about what this means. The other thing that, I don't know where you all will be tonight, but through at every hour on the 15, so 7:15, 8:15, 9:15, and 10:15, on the virtual watch event, we have groups of faculty who'll be talking about these issues based on the returns and what's come through tonight. So I think your point is a really good one. You never know if you're on the right side of it. But I do believe this year there are events that will provide that opportunity. So we'll make sure that we're getting it out there as much as possible.
I mean, we had a conversation earlier. We looked at the what now or now what, I've forgotten. The program didn't seem very ideological balance to me. And so we intentionally made an effort to seek out a speaker who would say, we're not for the conservative agenda. No matter who wins. That's a really open question because in some ways Trump carries the Republican Party, but the Republican agenda, or his agenda is quite different from the traditional conservative agenda, which includes things such as free trade and things like that. So in some ways, this question, no matter who wins, the question of what is the future of the conservative agenda is a really great one. And I hope it'll be represented in the program. That's our intention anyway.
Thanks.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much, Provost Carl and Sarah and President Katsulas for sharing this space with us. And thank you to my classmates for your questions and for trying using this space for dialogue and to challenge ourselves. And all the themes we heard were about tradition, were about community, and this recurring immigrant story that's such a big part of every space in this country. So I was really glad to hear those themes tonight and through different folks and through different stories. There's another tradition that we've been doing for a long time, and that's eating and drinking. So I invite you to please enjoy all the refreshment they provide tonight. With that said, we've kept you waiting for the results. I know the states are getting cold, so let's get to the watch party. Thanks again for being here.
Well, frankly, a lot of confidence on the Trump side. I think right now it's just too early to tell. Every race is falling the way you would have anticipated it would fall. States are falling the way you would anticipate